So first of all, let me just say you're an incredibly inspiring person. I've read all this stuff about you. It's absolutely incredible. So you did the TED Talk in Berlin, which was
Mhm.
named Change Your Channel, about Africa's
Yeah.
representation globally, which has been translated into 5 languages and shared over 20 million
Mhm.
times. Then you founded the Freetown Flood Educational Fund, which provided
Mhm.
education to 99 orphan survivors of Sierra Leone's 2017 flood and mudslide. You believe
Yeah.
in Sharity, not charity, and had a transformative experience
Mhm.
with 20 youths in Sierra Leone, some who had been orphaned or were child soldiers living on the streets. And you all worked together to create sneakers, art, and film. Can you
Yeah.
describe how you got the idea of charity and what it means to you?
I mean, obviously, it wasn't just an understanding that I always had. It was a process that I believe to truly lastingly impact something means you've been lastingly impacted. And unless that's the case, you've not made lasting change. Because I feel when we look at conventional charity, we see that billions and billions of dollars are pumped into all these projects. But when we really take an inventory of, what has come out of it, then when we put things into proportion, it's not really exactly a success rate. And I feel it has something to do with that. A lot of people, they donate around Christmas or this or that, but I feel unless you've been impacted, you haven't impacted another person. And when I worked with these 21 youth, it certainly impacted me. It was life changing for me and for them equally, and that I believe is charity. It's an exchange, where you give and you take and you create something that I also describe it as a cycle of regenesis. You give, you take, you give, you take. It becomes like a loop, and I feel that's important that people see that because we all have something to give. It may not look like that at first glance, and we often may not see what others are really able to give us, but each and every person has something to give.
Mhm.
And they certainly had a lot of insight to give to me, a shift in perspective.
Can you go into that, how they changed you, what kind of insights they gave you from your experience with them?
So we started the creative collective, and as a result, the profits were distributed evenly among them. However, the police in the area understood that every first of the month they received a certain amount of money and then would raid the bridge, this Lion's Base, notorious ghetto, gutter, actually, where they were living, and arrest them. So these young men were then forced to pay their way out of jail every month. And we had broken noses, broken teeth, missing teeth. It was just like a disaster. And I realized the flip side of the coin that I had created with the best intention, but I didn't know what that would lead to. So that's another thing. We often do things without realizing everything has two sides of the coin. And then I'm like, okay, I created this situation. Obviously, I had the best intentions, but now that's what's happened there. They're even less safe in the streets than they were before. And nobody would obviously rent them an apartment. They were notorious for, their behavior, stealing, and so on, and crime. So I said, okay, come stay with me. But I was staying in a kind of decent area. I just thought, okay, I have 3-4 bedrooms. I'm like, we're going to manage, right?
Right, right. Oh, yeah.
Then, of course, I understood how our realities clashed because just simple things as flushing toilet, running water, the things that we take for so granted was something like a brand new experience for them. Then also the fact that now we're living in a house together and there is no such thing as hiding things because you're scared the other person would steal it, because they would constantly hide things like under my bed, food. For some reason, they thought under my bed is the safest place. And I'm like, this attracts rats. Why would you do
Yeah.
that? He said, yeah, for safekeeping. And I'm like, no, No, it's not going to happen in this house. We ask each other, right? If I want to take something from you, I'll ask you, and vice versa. And everybody has to abide by these rules, because I'm not going to start hiding stuff and locking it from this and that. And there's just so many things that were totally unexpected. Of course, in the end, now we laugh about all of these stories, but during the time, there was so much commotion always going on. Imagine you come home and two guys, who were accustomed to live in a rather rough environment, where even it goes as far as murder over like trivial things, fighting each other with knives over a bowl of rice.
So how do you feel about like big charities that go into Africa, like UNICEF?
I feel a lot of ignorance is at play, because even I went into the scenario ignorantly. Every day was a scenario that I hadn't even scope in my mind to imagine that scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So me, I'm half Sierra Leonean, right?
Right.
And I have a father who's seen both, who's seen a rather tough reality and privilege, because when his mom parted from his dad, he's also had to walk for miles to school and put his shoes on when he reached the classroom in order not to wear off the soles, whilst he was taken with a driver, whilst his parents are together. So he's seen both, right? So that also was imprinted on me to a certain extent. But what about Western people come through a Eurocentric lens who can't even imagine certain scenarios, now coming there with a Western mindset and a Western idea that's probably rooted in great intentions, just doesn't apply. It just doesn't apply. I had this conversation with somebody who wanted to implement the blockchain in order to circumvent the mining of conflict minerals. And he was explaining to me, and then we go do this and this and this. I'm like, excuse me, where is everybody going to punch in on their phone? People don't have phones. They have no credit in their phones. Do you think they can then send you a message to report if there is misconduct going? I'm like, wow. I can tell you for free, it's not going to work like how you imagine it. This is an ideal scenario. And the issue I have with these organizations is how the dollar that's donated is distributed, right? A fraction of that dollar is actually impacting that project. The majority goes into overheads, and the dollars that the innocent person donates contributes to the Western GDP in quite substantial amounts, right? Because this is a big industry. I'm not saying it's a big, everybody is just, let's help Africa. No, it's an industry. These people get paid for that, and they get paid well for that. People aren't critically thinking when it comes to charity. We fail to understand, yes, they're collecting millions, but what is done with these millions? Obviously, they are the people that are benefiting from it before anybody else. And the way that they're looking at Africans, it's a clickbait almost. They're viewed in a way that's not 100% humane. Black bodies are viewed as props, right? We see it on the videos. We see it when white people go to Africa, a bunch of kids around them. It's all cute. You're just taking pictures with some random person's kid. I don't see you doing that. And do you do that wherever you live? No, right? You don't go to the playground and just gather a bunch of kids, right? So in Africa, Black bodies, they're viewed as props because it's been going on for so long. So I feel a lot of reprogramming, deprogramming, and sensitization has to happen in order for people to understand, hey, this is not the way, and a lot of people do it really for show.
How would you say like we can reprogram ourselves in a way? Like, what's the best way for us to see what Africa's really like? Because we are programmed through UNICEF, Oxfam, everything.
I think a good rule of thumb is if you help, make sure you have an interaction with a project, with a person, or whatever, and make sure there is an exchange. There are amazing young entrepreneurs in Africa. Support that. Buy a product of an African person because he employs how many other Africans, right? He can then provide job opportunities to those. Or there's a lot of people that are talented. Like with the Financial Creative Collective, we created so much art and we sold this art. We managed to sustain the project without donations because we always facilitate an exchange, and there are hundreds and thousands of artists out there where you get something where that person has invested their energy and you in exchange pay for that with money where you invested your energy, and then you're interacting on different terms. Number one, on eye level. And I feel this is sustainable. It is like you approach it with respect.
And kind of with that, there's a suburb of Chicago, which is the first city, it's Evanston. It's the first city in the US that's going to pay Black residents reparations for everything that they've been through. Yeah.
Really?
So
I haven't heard of that. When did this happen?
March, end of March.
In March? Okay.
Yeah. And so now other cities are picking it up in the US. It hasn't gone to the federal government yet, but I'm wondering
I think it's a brilliant idea. I think it's phenomenal. I'm surprised I haven't heard of this, because I feel that there was no exchange. Black people were exploited for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you still owe them, as I said, give and take. So reparations are due. I'm a half German, and I think Germans led by example on how that can be done, by paying the Holocaust survivors. So I feel there are blueprints out there, that we could follow in order to quantify what is owed to survivors of the slave trade, because as long as that doesn't happen, generally there is no trust from Black people towards white people. Maybe that can be a step in the right direction.
So I'm wondering, kind of like off that, how do you feel about Black Lives Matter? Do you think that they should do more or less? Like, what's your view on them?
Fraudulent.
Really?
I don't even want to get into it because I know it will trigger so many people. I said it from the very first moment that this wave came about. The oxymoron is what disturbs me. Black Lives Matter in proximity to whiteness. If you would call your organization Black Lives Matter in proximity to whiteness, I'm like, okay, great. I cheer for you because you identified that niche. Black Lives Matter in proximity to whiteness, that's what you're marching for, because you're marching for those who were murdered by white police officers. You're not marching for those who were murdered by Black police officers. Just in Chicago alone, since beginning of this year, around 100 young Black men, I'm not counting the women, lost their lives to homicides. Nobody marching because the murderer wasn't white enough. Nobody cares about Black lives. Black people do not care about Black lives. Let's be very honest. Hypocrisy is something that gets me regardless of who perpetrates it. And obviously a lot of people feel like they're hesitant to express this criticism. However, it's the blatant truth. Black lives do not matter unless they're in proximity to whiteness. And that's a sad thing, because if you remove yourself from all responsibility, if you say, okay, white people are the problem, white people definitely caused the shit show. Okay, but where are we today? Who kills most Black people? Who kills most Black people? Let's be very honest. Who assaults most Black women? Who rapes most Black women today, right? And if we do not acknowledge that we have a problem, not just in America, they get so worked up whenever I say this. Number one, we just look at statistics. Number two, let's look at the globe. Let's look at all these places where there's no white police officers. Who kills all these Black men? This is a fellow Black people, Caribbean, Africa, and so on. So for us to focus 1000% of our energy on 1% or 0.001% of the problem, I think that's just idiocracy. No person that is ultimately dedicated to efficient results will actually operate like that. And another thing I'd like to say, because Black people, if you kind of outsource the problem, if there's such thing as outsourcing the problem, but you give away responsibility, the responsibility is white people. White people are causing all the problems, right? The murders and this and that. That's what the focus would indicate, right? Because so much focus on that. You also depraving yourself of the opportunity to be the solution. By really just looking at that, okay, there's a problem, which is a problem. Police brutality is a problem. Definitely. And racism within police force is a problem. But there's a vast problem that we can actually address, that nobody can solve for us, and it is definitely the result of post-traumatic slave syndrome. colonialism, all of these things, yes, led to that, because no people will just get up and start shooting each other. No, you must be highly traumatized to get that violent and frustrated. So we see the effects of these crimes against humanity. But I feel at this point, white people cannot, even though they're the root cause, but they can't help us to fix that.
Right.
Maybe they can be a support system or something, but if we internally have these issues, we internally must solve them. And if Black lives really matter, then we would start where most lives are taken. I personally, if I have an issue and I really believe Black lives matter, I would then focus 99% of my energy to save the hundreds and thousands of Black lives that are taken, and then invest 1% of my energy to the 1% that are taken out by police brutality.
Right. I think I'm just going to wrap up with one more question, actually, because I mean, this has been an amazing conversation and you have like gone above and beyond answering my questions. Say like 10 years from now, what would you like to see in the world? Like what changes would you like to see?
Truth is like, it's almost the flame that ignites so much, right? And from truth can come justice. And from justice can come equality. And from equality can come balance. And that's ultimately what gets my heart beating. What I live for and strive for is balance. Because from balance can come harmony. And from harmony is a prerequisite to unity. Well,
I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. This was absolutely amazing. And I had such a great time. And I really want to keep in contact with you in the future.
Likewise.
Bye.